It started on a Wednesday, the kind of gray, nondescript morning that blends into 1,000 others. Michael Reeves stood in line at the corner cafe, blinking at the backlit menu as if it were written in another language. He wasn't particularly tired, nor was he in a rush. He just couldn't shake the sense that something was off. It was nothing overt, just a subtle tension, like walking into a room where someone had been fighting moments before. He adjusted his collar, stepped forward, and ordered the usual, a black coffee and a cranberry muffin. The barista gave a small, rehearsed smile, repeating the order like an echo, then turning away to make it. That's when he heard it for the first time, a whisper, very soft, right beside his ear. Marrow. Michael turned sharply, the hairs on the back of his neck stiff. There was no one near him, only the guy behind him in line who was looking at his phone, earbuds firmly in. A woman sat alone at a table near the window, her head tilted toward her drink, bored and unaware. He shook his head. Maybe someone brushed past him. Maybe he imagined it. He paid, took his coffee, and left without the muffin. The whisper stayed with him through the walk to work. It repeated, not constantly, but occasionally, unpredictably, like a stray thought breaking through the surface. Marrow. Each time it came, he'd snap his head to the side, expecting to see someone. But there was never anyone, just people going about their lives, all moving forward as if nothing had changed. By the time he reached his office, Michael had convinced himself it was a fluke. He worked in data analysis for a mid-sized firm that specialized in logistics. The work was repetitive, but paid well enough to afford a small apartment downtown. His co-workers were pleasant in that way people are when they're only forced to interact for 8 hours a day. No one would call each other friends, but they all laughed at the same tired jokes and shared glances during meetings. He sat at his desk, booted up his computer, and tried to drown himself in spreadsheets. But the whisper returned. Only once that morning, soft, breathy, unmistakably human. Marrow. He stood up quickly, bumping his chair back into a filing cabinet. His co-worker, Daniel, looked over from his cubicle with raised brows. "You good?" Daniel asked. Michael gave a short nod, rubbed his face, and sat back down. He didn't hear it again that day. That night, alone in his apartment, he searched the name. Marrow could mean many things. Bone marrow, of course. There was a town named Marrow in England, a few indie bands, even a horror novel with the word in the title. None of it clicked. None of it gave any reason why the name would be whispered to him. He went to bed with a headache and a strange sense of unease that wouldn't let up, as if something was watching him just out of frame. He dreamed of shadows, thin and tall, that shifted behind a curtain he couldn't pull back. The whisper echoed in the dream, repeating more insistently this time. He woke, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. 3:11 a.m. The digital clock on his nightstand glowed red in the darkness. He sat up, straining to hear, but the apartment was silent. The next few days were worse. The whisper came again on the train, then again in a public bathroom. Once, horrifyingly, when he was walking through a quiet cemetery on a lunch break, trying to clear his mind. Each time, it was the same. Marrow. No other words, no other sound. Michael began to avoid public places. He stopped going to the gym, stopped taking the train. He started driving again, even though traffic drove him crazy. But it didn't matter. The whisper followed. Sometimes in his own apartment, when he was shaving or brushing his teeth or just standing in the kitchen staring at nothing. He tried recording it, left his phone running while he worked or slept. Every playback was silent. He tried using white noise. He tried listening to music in headphones. Nothing drowned it out completely. The whisper always found a way to slip through. By the second week, he started to believe he was losing his mind. He saw a doctor who ran a battery of tests and found nothing wrong. No signs of schizophrenia, no neurological issues, no tumors. The doctor suggested stress, maybe something unresolved in his past. Had he been under a lot of pressure lately? Michael left the office furious. What did a lot of pressure even mean? Who wasn't under pressure? He finally decided to tell someone. He visited his parents one evening unannounced. His mother looked surprised but happy to see him. His father, as always, sat stiffly in his armchair, barely turning from the TV. They talked for a while. Michael forced small talk about work and the weather. Then he asked them, "Have you ever heard a name? Whispered, just one word, Marrow." His mother went silent. Her eyes slowly drifted to his father. The color drained from her face. His father finally turned from the television. Pale, unblinking. They didn't answer, not with words. His mother stood abruptly, announcing she needed to check the oven, even though dinner wasn't cooking. His father stood and walked into the hallway, saying something about the mail. Neither returned to the room. Michael sat there alone, heart pounding. The silence was heavier than any answer could have been. He didn't stay long after that. On the drive home, the whisper came again, louder this time, almost urgent. Marrow. He almost swerved off the road. He called his sister the next day. Kara lived 2 states away, a teacher with a small child and a husband who traveled often. She picked up, her voice tired but cheerful. They caught up briefly before Michael asked her. "I need to know something," he said. "Do you remember hearing the name Morrow when we were kids?" There was a pause, not long, but charged. "No," she said. "Why?" But her voice had changed. It trembled ever so slightly. And then she made an excuse to get off the phone. Said her son was calling for her. Said she'd call him back. She didn't. Now Michael was sure of it. He wasn't crazy. Other people had heard the name too. Maybe not recently, maybe not as often, but they knew. His family knew. That night, the whisper came again. But it was different. Not in tone, not in cadence, but in location. It came from inside his apartment. He had been brushing his teeth, leaning over the sink. The name came, not by his ear this time, but from behind him. Software, as if someone had whispered it directly into the bathroom doorway. "Marrow!" He spun around. Nothing. He walked the entire apartment. Lights on. Knife from the kitchen in his hand. Checked the locks, the windows, the closet, under the bed. Nothing. But he knew it had been there, just out of sight. Sleep was impossible that night. The next day, he called his boss and told him he needed some time off. Didn't say why, didn't have to. Something in his voice must have made it obvious. The boss didn't argue. Michael stayed inside, curtains closed, lights on. He barely ate, barely moved, just sat on the couch trying to listen, trying to hear more, something, anything. He waited for the whisper. It didn't come for hours. And then, as dusk settled, it returned. Morrow, closer, at the edge of his hearing. He leaned forward, barely breathing. Nothing. Marrow. The whisper was no longer just a sound. It was a presence, A shape behind the voice, a weight to the breath. It came from corners that were too dark, from behind doors left slightly ajar, from reflections that didn't quite mirror his movements. The shadows in his apartment began to look different, longer, thicker. Sometimes they moved. He covered the mirrors. He left every light on. He slept in short bursts, never fully unconscious, the whisper weaving in and out of his half-formed dreams. Always that name. He started writing it down, page after page. Marrow, filling notebooks, sticking Post-its to the walls. He didn't know why. He just had to. One morning, he woke to find his fingernails dirty, soil under them, his feet cold, his shoes damp. He checked the front door, locked. He checked the windows, locked. He checked himself in the mirror. Something about his eyes looked unfamiliar. His phone rang that afternoon, unknown number. He answered, but no one spoke, just silence. Then the softest breath, and then Marrow. He screamed and threw the phone across the room. He didn't sleep that night, nor the night after. By the end of the month, Michael looked like a shell of himself, pale, hollow-eyed, thinner. He stopped answering calls. His apartment was a disaster. Papers everywhere, lights burnt out, mirrors shattered. He didn't leave, not anymore. He waited for the whisper, waited for it to say something more. But it never did. It only said one word, and it was getting louder. Michael stopped keeping the track of the days. The apartment existed in a permanent dusk now, light filtering through layers of dust and blinds that hadn't been opened in weeks. The refrigerator hummed louder than usual, the bulb inside flickering dimly each time he opened it to stare blankly at what remained. Half a bottle of ketchup, some pickles, a nearly empty milk jug. He ate when he remembered to, slept only when he collapsed. The whispers never left. Marrow, always just that, never more. The voice had texture now, a rhythm. It was like hearing someone exhale right behind him, inches from his neck. Sometimes it echoed off the walls, as though the word had been shouted from another room, but arrived as a whisper. Once, it came from beneath the floorboards, dragging the name out slowly like something being pulled by force through a narrow pipe. He tried to record it again, desperate to catch even a hint of sound. He left his phone on for hours, the battery draining by late afternoon. But on playback, nothing, just silence, sometimes static. And once, just once, there was a click, like the sound of a door unlatching. But all his doors had remained closed. The worst was the quiet, the hours in between. It wasn't peace, it was waiting, anticipation, like something was preparing itself, or watching him prepare. He'd become convinced that the whisper wasn't random anymore. It came more often when he was about to fall asleep, or when he looked too long into corners where the shadows pooled unnaturally. And it always stopped when he tried to speak it out loud. He tested it once, mouthing the word in front of the bathroom mirror. No sound escaped him. It felt like the air refused to carry his voice. He could scream any other word, shout curses, cry for help. But the name stuck in his throat like thorns. Then came the night he saw the reflection. He was standing at the kitchen sink, staring into the black void of the window above it. His own face stared back, wan, sickly, eyes rimmed with red. But something shifted. Behind him, a figure, barely visible, only the outline, tall, thin, unmoving. He turned, heart punching against his ribs. Nothing. He checked the apartment again, frantic, half-mad, searching with trembling hands. Still nothing. But the whisper returned, again from that same place, right by his ear. Marrow! He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he dug through an old photo box in his closet. He needed something, anything, to anchor himself. Proof of who he'd been, that he wasn't losing everything, that there was still a Michael Reeves under all this. He pulled out pictures from high school, college, family holidays. One photo, Christmas, maybe 10 years ago, he stared at for a long time. He was standing between his parents, all of them in sweaters too hot for the living room fireplace behind them. There was a fourth figure in the corner, Kara. Her smile was genuine, eyes bright. And just behind her shoulder, barely in frame, was a shadow. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it was all he could see. It wasn't a trick of the light. It had form, shoulders, something like arms, but too long, the shape of a head slightly bent. Watching? Michael tore the photo in half and burned it in the sink. The next morning, he drove to his parents' house. It was raining by the time he arrived. The street looked smaller than he remembered. His mother answered the door, wrapped in a housecoat, lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him, but she said nothing. He stepped inside. The house was quiet. A candle burned in the kitchen, cinnamon-scented. His father wasn't in the living room this time. The television was off. The house felt frozen in time. "I need to talk to you," Michael said. His voice sounded weak in the stillness. His mother nodded slowly and sat at the kitchen table. Michael didn't sit. He told her everything about the whispers, about the name, about how he couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, couldn't think without it crawling into his ears. He told her about the figure in the reflection, the shifting shadows, the way time seemed to blur. When he finished, she said nothing for a long time. Then, finally, she whispered, "We hoped it wouldn't find you." Michael felt the air leave his lungs. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old photo album. Not the usual kind. This one was battered, the cover torn. She opened it to a page near the end. It was a picture of a man, middle-aged, unsmiling. The photograph was yellowed, the edges curling. On the back, someone had written a name in shaky script, Jonathan Marrow. Michael stared. "Your grandfather," she said. "My father." She had never spoken of him. Michael barely remembered the name, if at all. He flipped the photo over again, stared at the face. "He was a quiet man," she said. "Not cruel, not warm either, just distant. He lived alone in his later years, but there were stories, whispers about how he'd changed, started seeing things, hearing things." Michael's mouth felt dry. What happened to him? "He disappeared," she said. "One day, gone, left the house unlocked. Food on the stove, the bed made, no sign of struggle, no body." "When?" She hesitated. "The day after he told someone about the whisper." Michael felt something cold wrap around his spine. "I never heard it," she said. "But my brother did, your Uncle Paul, when we were teenagers. He started acting strange, kept writing the name down, said it came to him at night. We thought he was joking. Then he stopped talking entirely, just stopped, like he forgot how." Michael remembered Paul. Barely. A man who never smiled, who never spoke. "After that," she said, "your father and I made a promise. If it came back, we'd pretend not to know. Maybe that way it would pass over." She looked up at Michael, eyes glassy. "But it didn't, did it?" Michael drove home in a daze. The rain had stopped. The clouds were lower now, closer to the earth, as if something heavy pressed down from above. That night, He lit every candle he owned. He scattered salt at the windows. He wrote the name over and over on slips of paper and burned them in a bowl. He didn't know what he was doing, just that he had to do something. The whisper came anyway. "Marrow!" It echoed louder than ever, through the walls, beneath the floor, from inside the mirror, behind the dripping faucet, just beyond the edges of sleep. He stopped dreaming altogether. Instead, he began to see while awake. The figure would stand at the corner of the room, not moving, not speaking, its limbs impossibly long, head cocked slightly, as if listening, watching. He caught it, once reflected in the microwave door. He turned, but it was gone. Another time, he found his closet door open, though he'd locked it. Inside, all his clothes were shredded, sliced into long, even strips like ribbons. The name Marrow was written on the inside of the door in what looked like ash. He tried calling Cora again. This time, she answered. He told her everything again. Her silence stretched through the phone, and then, in a voice hollow with fear, she said, "You should never have said it aloud." "What is it?" he asked. "What does it want?" But she hung up. That night, something touched him. He was lying in bed, eyes wide, lights off. The room felt colder than usual, the air thick, hard to breathe. He tried not to blink. Then he felt it, a pressure on the edge of the mattress, like someone sitting. He didn't move. The whisper came again. Marrow. But this time, it wasn't by his ear. It came from directly behind his head. He screamed, threw the blankets, ran from the room, heart slamming so hard he felt dizzy. When he turned back, the bed was empty, but the indentation remained. He drove all night, just drove, no direction, gas station to gas station, trying to outrun the name, outrun the presence. It followed him still. Once, as he pumped gas, he glanced into the reflection of his car's window. The figure stood on the other side of the glass, inches from his face. He fell backward, scrambled to his feet, but there was no one there. In the following days, the boundary between reality and dream collapsed entirely. Michael began to lose time. He'd wake up in the shower, fully clothed. Once, he came to standing on the roof of his apartment building, barefoot, fingers bloodied from clawing at the concrete. He didn't remember climbing the stairs. The name carved itself into his mind, a permanent echo, not just heard, but felt, in his bones, in the pressure behind his eyes. Then came the night it said something else. He was sitting on the floor of his living room, back against the wall, knife in hand, eyes on the hallway. The whisper came, soft, breathy. Marrow, then a pause, and then, "He hears you." Michael sat frozen, every inch of his body locked in place. The air went still, no sound, no movement, just the echo of those words. He didn't know how long he stayed there, hours, maybe longer. He called Kara again the next day. This time she didn't answer. He called her husband's number, voicemail. He called her school. They said she'd been on extended leave. Family emergency, they said. Michael knew what that meant. He tried to sleep one last time, and in the hour before dawn, he dreamt. He stood in a field of ash, trees dead, ground cracked, the sky overhead a churning black. Across the field stood the figure, tall, faceless, arms stretched downward. At its feet, bones, human, countless. The whisper came not as a sound, but as a force. It pushed against his chest, entered his skull. Marrow. He woke with blood in his mouth. There was no longer any doubt. Something had followed his bloodline, something old, something buried. And now it was awake. The sky was the color of wet ash the day Michael decided to speak it back. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Not really. His body existed in a constant haze of trembling limbs and a brittle mind, his thoughts like fraying wires sparking against each other. The apartment had transformed. What was once a sanctuary was now a shrine. Papers, symbols, photographs, candles, salt, half-burned incense. He'd found himself obsessively drawing circles with 7 lines crossing through them, never knowing why, only that it felt right. Protective, maybe, or summoning. The name had stopped being a whisper. Now it pulsed. It pressed against his skin from the inside, bloated and burning. His ears rang when he wasn't listening to it. His eyes twitched when he tried to look at anything too long. Even blinking felt like closing his eyes on a predator. He could no longer tell what was real. Reflections in the mirror didn't move the same way he did. His shadow would sometimes stretch in the wrong direction. Food had no taste. Clocks no longer tracked time in a way that made sense. He watched the second hand on his wristwatch tick backward for 10 full minutes before the battery died. That morning, as gray light filtered through the cracked blinds, he found a photograph lying on the kitchen counter. He hadn't placed it there. It was the picture of his grandfather, Jonathan Marrow. But now, the face was blurred, smudged, like someone had dragged a wet thumb across it. Written on the back, in unfamiliar handwriting, were 3 words: "He is listening." Michael laughed. He laughed until he cried. And then he got dressed. He didn't know where he was going until he was already halfway there. The drive took him out of the city, through winding back roads, the trees leaning over like they wanted to listen too. Fog clung low to the ground. The engine sounded wrong, higher pitched, strained. Or maybe it was the road beneath it, like the world itself had changed frequency. The house he found didn't exist on any map. He was sure of it. But it was there, an old, decaying 2-story colonial, black shutters hanging off broken hinges, windows dark, wood rotted. Yet the front door was untouched, bright red, new. He stepped out of the car. Gravel crunched underfoot. The air smelled of burning leaves and something deeper, something wet and foul beneath the soil. He didn't knock. The door opened before he reached it. Inside, the house was silent. Dust floated in thick clouds like ash in still air. The wallpaper peeled in long curls, exposing dark wood beneath. The air was heavy, pressed in on him like a hand on his back, urging him forward. He passed through rooms without thinking, each one filled with things that didn't belong. A clawfoot tub in the hallway, a piano with no keys, dolls missing eyes, portraits turned to face the wall. The house had grown around the name. He could feel it humming behind the walls. In the back room, what must have once been the dining room, was a table. On it sat a mirror, round, gilded, too clean for this place. He approached it slowly, every step a countdown. His reflection met him, hollow eyes, chapped lips, a man undone. Behind his reflection stood the figure. It didn't move. He didn't turn. Instead, Michael finally said it. He opened his mouth, drew breath into lungs that felt full of smoke, and he said it aloud. "Marrow." The sound wasn't human when it left him. It echoed too long, too low. The syllables cracked the air like ice shattering. The walls groaned, the mirror darkened, and something answered. From the corners of the room, the shadows pulled inward, sucked toward the mirror like smoke to flame. The house shook, timbers groaning with age and agony, the lights, none of which had been on, flickered. He felt it rise behind him, the presence, the entity. It was no longer just a figure, it was a shape of the impossible. It towered, yet had no mass. Its limbs coiled like smoke and bone. Its face, if there was one, was a void with teeth. Rows and rows, opening wider. He didn't run. He whispered the name again. Marrow? The entity paused, and then it leaned in. Its breath was cold rot, a storm inside a corpse. Michael didn't flinch. Why me? He asked. His voice was thin, a whisper of a whisper. The answer did not come in words. It came in a memory. Suddenly, he was standing in a different room, a child's room. Blue wallpaper, stuffed animals, a small white crib. He saw himself, much younger, barely a child, sitting on the floor, stacking blocks. A shadow loomed in the doorway and whispered, Marrow. Michael jerked back to the present, gasping, knees buckling. It had been with him always. It had chosen him long ago, or had been called to him. He stared at the mirror, the surface now rippling like water, and he understood. The whisper wasn't a warning. It was an invitation, a key. He stepped closer. The thing behind him watched but did not follow. It didn't need to. Michael reached out and touched the mirror. It swallowed him whole. He didn't fall. He descended. The world on the other side was not a world. It was a shape, a feeling, a sound made visible. Darkness here was alive, thick like oil, moving in patterns that imitated thoughts. Whispers curled through the air like vines. Names floated in the black, countless names, fading in and out like dying stars. And in the center of it all, a throne of bone. Upon it, a figure, not the same as the one in the house. Older, wider, endless, it spoke without moving, and Michael heard it not in his ears, but in his bones. You have answered. He could not speak. You are chosen. He wanted to scream. You are the door. And Michael understood. The whispers weren't calling him. They were coming from him. He was the conduit, the bridge, the open wound through which it could speak into the world. All this time, it had been growing inside him, fed by his fear, his attention, his belief, and now it was ready. It reached out, not with hands, but with purpose, and touched the core of him. Pain exploded through every cell. Light and dark collided. His eyes boiled with images. Cities sinking, skies tearing, faces stretched in infinite screams. He saw Kara, pale, eyes wide, mouth open but silent. Her son behind her, shaking. He saw his mother lying in bed, eyes open but empty. He saw his own face, but older, cracked, smiling. He screamed and awoke, back in the apartment. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows. The apartment was clean, silent. No notes, no candles, no drawings, no signs of chaos. Michael sat up. He felt calm. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt clear, whole. He stood and walked to the mirror. His reflection smiled back. It wasn't quite his smile, but it would do. The name no longer whispered, it sang. That day, Michael went out. The world welcomed him back with open arms. He spoke to his neighbors, smiled at strangers, laughed, shook hands, and each person who heard his voice paused just a moment, eyes blinking, expression shifting, as if something had passed through them, as if they had heard something, felt something. That night, he went home. He wrote the name on a single piece of paper. He folded it, slipped it into an envelope, and mailed it to Kara. He knew she'd open it, and when she read it, she would hear it too. Days passed, and the whispers began again, not to him, to others across the city. A woman screamed in a library and couldn't explain why. A child drew circles on the wall over and over. A man in a parking garage turned and swore someone had said his name, but no one was there. The entity had learned. It no longer needed to whisper from behind. It could whisper through. Michael walked among them now, not haunted, not afraid. He was the whisper. He was the door. And it was open.